I feel like not getting the attention that I wanted from my parents, I looked to the opposite sex. Just looking for that sense of value, that sense of worth, that sense of I'm okay, I'm lovable, that became, honestly, that became my addiction. And so I have to go get my next fix, my next emotional fix from the next relationship. I had to fill that hole inside of me. I had to be in a relationship. I had to have that validation that I was worthy of love and had that validation from the world. You know, for somebody that has a love and relationship addiction, Eric, the man in my life was my God. That's who I worshiped because I would do anything to keep them happy so that they would continue to love me.
King Solomon writes, "Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been done will be done again, and there's nothing new under the sun." Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, and he discovered that nothing this world has to offer can fill the emptiness that dwells inside of me. What have you tried to fill your life with? Have you tried to find meaning in work, money, or success? Maybe you've tried alcohol or drugs. Perhaps, like our guest today, you've tried to fill your life with love and relationships. How does a person break an addiction to other people? Is there anything that can fill my need for love, or am I destined to bounce from one failed relationship to another? These are questions that my guest will answer today as she shares her life change story with us. My name is Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. Our guest is zooming in all the way from Arizona, and I can't wait for you to hear her story. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hello, Eric. Thank you so much for inviting me on. My name is Diane. I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm just happy to be here to share some of my story to maybe hopefully give others hope.
Well, Diane, thank you so much again for agreeing to do this. So, every story has a beginning. We're going to start with
Mhm.
your beginning. Tell us where you grew up and tell us a little bit about your family of origin.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm the oldest of four, and I have two younger sisters, and my brother is the baby of the family. I was a military brat and I was born at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs many years ago. I say in a land far, far away. So my father was in the Air Force, and interestingly enough, so was my mom at that time. So we're talking about this was back in the early 50s, and that was where they met in Colorado Springs. And I think a friend of my mom was the one that told her, "You need to meet this man because he has the same last name as you do." So my mom never had to change her maiden name. They both have the same last name. And I just tell people I think I'm just related to myself somewhere down the line. But, anyways, so we moved a lot because my dad, like I said, was in the military, but that made it very difficult for to make friends, obviously, because we didn't stay in one place very long. I mean, probably a year and a half was the most we stayed anywhere. So I was always trying to fit into my new environment. Me and my siblings have always been very close because we were the ones that were always together, obviously, especially moving so much. We traveled from one assignment to another. We always camped out. We never stayed in motels or hotels. I think it was mainly because we just couldn't afford it, to be honest with you. So we did a lot of growing up in the outdoors of fishing and camping. And I just remember driving across country more than once. And I truly, to this day, still have a love for camping and fishing because of that. I think I was about 15 years old when my dad retired. We moved to Selma, California. It was pretty cool. We had 5 acres, we had garden, we had horses and chickens and different things like that. And that's where I started high school. It was pretty rough. It was an environment that I was definitely not used to because it was a heavily Hispanic population. And here I was, this young 15-year-old blonde pan girl from California. I didn't really fit in. I got a lot of attention from the boys, and but that brought me a lot of negative attention from the girls as well. So it was a tough environment for me, to be honest with you.
Okay, so let me ask you this question because you jumped to a teenager really quickly. So, as a child growing up, was there any faith in your childhood? Now, I know you said you didn't stay more than a year and a half. That's got to be challenging for any family, any kids. I mean, you're the new kid in school every time you move,
Mhm.
and so did your parents instill any faith? Did you guys pray at home? Did you go to church on Sundays? I mean, tell me a little bit about that. What was God to you?
Yeah, actually, no, none of that. There was none of that. Um, it wasn't until around this age we were in California that my siblings and I started going to church when this local church bus would come around. So here we were teenagers, 13, 14, 15, and my younger brother getting on this church bus to go to this little Church of the Nazarene in Selma, California. That's the first time I remember attending church. Um, and my parents, I don't ever recall my parents going to church, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, growing up, before this time. Yeah.
So now that you are, an adult and that you can look back on your childhood, do you notice any dysfunction that was going on in your family when you were a child, or were you totally oblivious? And do you feel like you had a pretty normal and good childhood? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, being an adult now, I know that there was dysfunction in my family, but when I was growing up in it, I just thought that's where everybody's family was, right? I mean, that's what we all think when we're growing up because we don't know anything else. So my father was the alcoholic. My mother was the codependent. She was very critical, very judgmental. And so there was a lot of fighting when my dad would come home drunk, or spend most of his paycheck. So I just remember many, many nights laying in bed just listening to them. Um, but besides that, I mean, I wasn't aware of the concept of alcoholic. I just, oh, there he is, he's drunk again, whatever, and fighting again. So that was the dysfunction in my family, yeah, at that time. So when I look back now, I think I had a pretty good childhood, to be honest with you. I just, I didn't realize we didn't have any money. We were poor and he was alcoholic. I don't know. It was just like that's just what everybody did. So,
Well, it sounded like you got along with your siblings quite well, and you said you were close to them. So let's go back
mhm,
to 13. You said you're 13. You're now in a new area, and your dad's retired. And so,
mhm.
what happened at that point in your life?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was I said we started going to church when this little church bus would come around, and it was there that I kind of started learning about Jesus and about his love for me, and and I had always been told that you needed to be baptized to go to heaven. I wanted to go to heaven. I wanted to be good. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. So Easter was coming up, and I invited my parents to come to church on Easter Sunday with us because I had decided that I was going to go to the front of the church and accept Christ into my heart. So here I was actually 15 at the time. So they agreed and they did go to church with this. So it was me and my siblings and my mom and dad. And then at the end of the sermon, when the pastor did the invitation, I stood up and walked up to the front of the church and accepted Christ as my savior. Now, at that time, you know, I think I really wanted the Lord in my life. I wanted to be good. I wanted to make sure that I went to heaven. But I also wanted the approval of my parents. My mother is very critical and judgmental, so I could never please her. So I really wanted that. But honestly, there was no response from my parents, none whatsoever. There was no hugs, no kisses, no nothing. And so I really believe that they didn't know how to respond. I don't think they had the Lord in their life, so they didn't know how to respond to that. So we just went home and everybody acted like it was just another day and nothing had happened. And of course, I wasn't really discipled and I just felt like a failure in my parents' eyes again. And really quickly after that, I turned back to the world.
Where did
Mhm.
uh, where did that go for you? So you didn't have much faith and religion there at home. They didn't really acknowledge the fact that you
Right.
had received
Mm-mm.
Christ. And so that kind of went to the back burner. And now you're at school and you're developing friends. And did you have any boyfriends? And did you have, and what,
Hmm.
what decisions did you make in high school?
Yeah. Well, again, I kind of didn't feel accepted in high school, but I did get a lot of, like I said, attention from boys. And so I feel like not getting the attention that I wanted from my parents, I looked to the opposite sex. So here I was, and it was 15. I was 15 at the time. And probably within 6 months of accepting Christ, I turned back to the world and I became sexually involved with with boys, whatever, the opposite sex, I should say, just looking for that sense of value, that sense of worth, that sense of I'm okay, I'm lovable, and that became honestly, that became my addiction.
So would you
Hmm.
say, of course, we say love and relationship addiction. Sometimes we
Yes, we
we say
do.
that, that people are looking for love, that old song, looking for love in all the wrong places, that we're just looking for acceptance. So this sounds to me like that was a little bit of what was going on with you as well. So did you
Oh,
stick with one guy or did you have multiple boyfriends?
no, well, love and relationship addiction is a little complicated because I think a lot of times, especially women, I know for myself, this was the fact that we confuse love with sex. And so, but the opposite sex doesn't really think of it that way. And so, no, it wasn't, I was from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, because I didn't get that affirmation, that affection, that attention consistently. And so I'll have to go get my next fix, my next emotional fix from the next relationship. So it was one after another. You're right, it was just constant. I had to fill that hole inside of me that was just empty. I just hadn't any self-value and I didn't get, the affirmation that I needed from my parents because they had their own crap going on. And so I looked to the world for it. Yeah.
Did you feel confident as you got into high school stuff? Were you confident or did you pretend to be confident, but inside you were insecure? I mean, what was going on inside? What was your identity? What would you say your identity was, as a high schooler?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I had no confidence, no self-confidence, very introverted, very shy. Um, and and I think because we moved so much, I needed to fit in. So I became whatever they needed, whatever the group needed, whatever I needed to be. Almost think of it as kind of like becoming a chameleon. I had to fit in wherever I was. I had to mold myself to fit in wherever I went, right? To be a part of it. Because I had no self-image. I was whoever I needed to be to fit in, right? And get the attention that I needed from the world. So I just became whatever I needed to be, whoever I needed to be, do whatever I needed to be to please everybody else so that they would like me.
Yeah. You blended in with everyone else, right? So you wanted to be a
Yes.
part of the crowd and you wanted to
Yes.
be accepted and loved.
Yes.
And where did that lead you? Now, sometimes the love and relationship addiction, because we're looking to others for approval, we start getting into things that they're doing that maybe is not healthy. Did you get into any substances or anything like that, or did you stay away from that?
Um, Nothing out of the ordinary in high school, of course, partying and, was pot during that time was in the 70s and a lot of drinking and that kind of stuff. But um, as soon as I turned 18, I joined the military and that stopped all of that because I was just scared to death to get caught, or do anything wrong. I just wanted to be a good girl again and fit in, right? So no, not really. So I never really got into any kind of trouble, per se. Although I will say that even before I joined the military, right before that, I did end up getting pregnant. And of course, he was out of the picture almost immediately. And I chose to have an abortion. I think I was 17. So I did chose to have an abortion at that time. And then shortly thereafter, I joined the military.
So let me stop you right there because that's a really big event in your life.
Hmm.
How did that impact you emotionally? Because I've talked to many people that have had abortions and so forth, and different, depending on what you believe and depending on, how you feel or whether you have support or anything of that stuff. Did you
Hmm.
do that? Did your parents know you were getting an abortion? Did you hide that? And how did that make you feel inside?
Yeah, that's a good question. My mom knew. She was the one that encouraged me to have the abortion. Because I didn't have any faith and didn't really know anything about, beliefs per se. It was just like, okay, I guess this is what I got to do. What else am I supposed to do? Because again, he was out of the picture. Um, and so, yeah, my mom knew. I don't think my father ever knew, ever at all. And so I did it, and I think I just, okay, it's done, it's over, pushed it down, and that was the end of that.
So you immediately went into the military, you said right after that. Is that correct?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
now this is in the 70s. Is that
Hmm.
correct? So
Hmm.
there weren't a lot of women in the military then. I mean, so what was that like joining the military? Were you accepted or not so much?
Well, yes, you're right. There was not a lot of women in the military. I went into missile maintenance. I worked on Minuteman II missiles. And so it was a very technical career field and a very male-oriented career field as well, of course. And when I went to my first base, they didn't even have a barracks for women. So I had to stay in the same barracks that the guys stayed in, right? And yeah, and it was a different time. Here I was, this young, beautiful, blonde, tanned girl. I mean, just as like, yeah. So I wasn't taken seriously. I felt like, and I still, when I look back, I feel like they, just kind of that colloquial dumb blonde kind of coming in, right? Even when I ended up getting married like within a year or so after that, and got pregnant, and they at that time there was not even maternity uniforms for women in the military. So I had to wear civilian clothes the whole time that I was pregnant. So it was a very challenging time as a female in that in at that time. Yeah.
So, I mean, did they respect you at all? Or you said they didn't give you much credence, but I mean, did they
Yeah.
keep hands off? Did they, I mean, were you able to, keep them
Well,
from, making advances towards you and stuff? Or was that just part of it?
I wanted attention. That's what I needed. So I was like, I loved it, to be honest with you. At that time, I mean, I loved the attention. And then I think I started to understand the, I guess you could say, power that I had, right? Over men.
Yeah.
And that I could use that to get the attention, the affection, the affirmation that I needed from them. And so I exploited it. I used it. Oh yeah, definitely. Again, I had met this guy in tech school, and we ended up getting married, and everything was well, and for a while anyway. And yeah, yeah, and settled down and got pregnant and had my first son there and all that good stuff. And but I mean, it was a lot of, I think, sexual harassment, but it was mostly verbal, to
Okay.
be honest with you. I mean, I was never really like attacked or sexually molested or anything like that, to be
Good.
honest with you. So
So, did you have your child while you were still in the military then?
I did have my son when I was in the military. Yep, I did. And then we were 5 years in, and I was divorced, and I was single at the age of 24 with a baby, and soon married again and had two more kids with him. I was still in the military. I stayed in the military for 20 years.
Wow.
And yep, cross trained. I went, worked on cryptographic communications equipment. And that marriage lasted 5 years, and I was out of that one. And lots of relationships in between that, because that was my addiction. I had to be in a relationship. I had to have that validation that I was worthy of love, and had that validation from the world. So, and also what comes along with that is, of course, I was codependent. but also perfectionism, people pleasing, because I needed that validation that I was a good person from the world. So there was a lot of things that came along with that. And eventually, I had three sons. I was stationed overseas in Turkey. I went to Belgium. I mean, I've been all over the place with my kids. And then I was in a relationship. Where was I? I don't even know where I was. I think I was at the Pentagon and I got pregnant again. And so I was two marriages under my belt, getting ready to go through a bankruptcy, three kids, and another one on the way. And the dad was out of the picture. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this again. I can't afford another kid. I can't. I don't know what to do. So I made an appointment to have an abortion. I just didn't think I could do four kids as a single parent. Um, but I will tell you that at that time, though I still didn't have religion in my life or God in my life, my sisters did. And they were telling me that it was God who put that baby in my womb. And so, like I said, I had accepted the Lord when I was 15 back in Selma, California. And so I had been away from him all of those years, but I decided to start praying. And over the next week or so, I became so convicted about the abortion, I couldn't go through with it.
So I have a question. So you had three boys, and then this is your fourth. Is that correct?
Yep. And she was a little girl. Yep.
So your three boys. What is your oldest? Whenever you are having your daughter, how old is your oldest? There is he four,
11,
five, 11? Okay,
11,
11.
11, and then probably like 8 or 7 and 6 or something like that.
So how was your relationship with your kids? How did that being a
Well,
single mom? I mean, it sounds to me like you were in and out of relationships, and I mean, did
yeah.
you have much time with your kids? Were you very close to your children? I mean, tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about that mother, son's relationship there. How did that go?
Um, I think it was okay. I mean, we all got along, we all stayed together. Um, the fathers were kind of in and out of the picture, which was good. That was okay. That kind of worked out all right. And but here I was, like you said, with this love and relationship addiction, I was always trying to find another, and I had brought men in and out of their lives so much. Which is something I had to obviously deal with again later on as well, with the shame of what I had dragged all my kids through. And then my daughter came along, and that kind of cemented us a little bit more so. And then he was just a baby when we got transferred to Turkey. We went over to Turkey for 3 years. Yeah.
Wow. So you
So
took your
yeah,
kids
that
over
was
to
really cool.
Turkey. So you got four kids and you're in a
Yeah.
different country. I
Yeah.
mean, that's incredible. So you're in the military, so you're working. I mean, I
I
guess, are your
am.
kids at daycare?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. As a working parent, any working parent knows. I mean, in the military, we only got like 6, 8 weeks off when the babies were born. So they were in childcare almost immediately. I mean, they grew up in childcare. All of my kids did. And yeah, I mean, I just, you just do what you got to do, right?
So how long were you in Turkey then again?
I was in Turkey for about almost 3 years.
So you were there
Mhm.
for 3 years. Did you come back to the States after that?
I did. I came back to the Pentagon, which is where I actually left from. So I was at the Pentagon and yeah, yeah. And then I think I was there just for a few years and then I retired.
So now you said that your sisters, encouraged you to not have an abortion and that you started praying. So is that where it stopped, or did you pursue a relationship with God at that point, or
Yeah,
not?
actually I did. Once I went to Turkey, I actually started going to church and I was baptized for the first time in my life. My daughter was baptized with me. My sons were baptized later on, all three of them. And yeah, but I was just going through the motions. I knew about the Lord. It hadn't moved from my head to my heart at that point, right? I didn't have that intimate relationship. I was still living a sinful life, but I was going to church on Sundays. I didn't know any other way at that time.
So you come back to the Pentagon, your kids now, so your oldest has got to be what, 15 now, a teenager, something like that. So what's going on with Diane now that you're back in the States?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I was in a relationship with a guy I met in Turkey, and he had come back to the States, and we were together. So things were going pretty good. My kids were doing pretty good. Um, um, and then when that relationship ended, I ended up moving to North Carolina, to Charlotte, which is where all my family was. And so, yeah, my oldest was like 16 at that time, and then my 13-year-old, my middle kid was the one that we had the issues with. He was kind of our troublemaker, and between my ex-husband and me, we kept shifting him back and forth. I couldn't handle him. He was cutting school, hanging out with the wrong crowd, getting in trouble. And then I would ship him to him, and then when he got tired of it, he would ship him back. And looking back now, of course, we caused a lot of damage to that poor kid. But he, I think, started um, getting into drugs and again hanging with the wrong crowd. And it went downhill from there for a very long time. But when I was in Charlotte, I got back in church, met a guy in church, married him a year later, and I thought, great, I did it right this time, right? I married a Christian. Yeah, no. So the problem started almost immediately. He had his own baggage. I had my own baggage. We both brought our baggage into this marriage, and that lasted 5 years. I don't know what it is, about 5 years. But so that was my third marriage, and that ended in Charlotte.
Is this when your
And then I
son was
started
having all
dating.
the trouble with the drugs and stuff or not?
Oh yeah,
Okay. So
that was
how
part of it. He did, yeah, my teenage kids, he couldn't deal with them. They couldn't deal with him. It was not a good time.
so your three marriages and multiple relationships in between. What kept going wrong with the marriages? I mean, we talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
um, history repeating itself, and we talk about getting in a lot of. I've noticed this a lot with love and relationship addiction, that they keep finding the same people, and there's the same, like, some people are prone to finding people that are abusive, and they just keep
Yeah.
getting in those
Yeah.
relationships. I mean, so what was it that the kind of person that you kept getting connected to, and then what kept splitting you up?
Sure. Yeah, that's easy to identify now looking back and after being in recovery is first and foremost unrealistic expectations, right? And always, I mean, I think I lived in this fantasy world. If I could just find that right guy, my knight in shining armor, we would all be a happy family, right? But everybody has their own baggage. And I come into the relationship with unrealistic expectations, expecting them, first and foremost, to fulfill all of my emotional needs, because I had a lot. And when they didn't, and reality began to set in, I was like, okay, I'm done. Next. That was it for me. It was me that left every relationship. They
So
didn't meet my expectations, which was, love me, right?
so you had high expectations, and when those let you down, you were out, right?
I'm done.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So now
Yep.
back on the timeline. So you're North Carolina, right? Third
Yep.
third husband, five
Out of the
years.
picture. Out of the picture.
Okay, and you're gone again. So do you stay in North
Yep.
Carolina?
Yeah, I was in Charlotte for like 10 years. So then I started dating this guy that I met at this, I don't know, auto garage or something with fixing my tires. But he had just got out of prison. I was like, okay, but he paid attention to me. That's what I needed. And so that was another totally dysfunctional relationship where I started getting into smoking pot every day. And, you know, for somebody that has a love and relationship addiction, Eric, the man in my life was my God. That's who I worshiped because I would do anything to keep them happy so that they would continue to love me. That's using other people to get what I needed to fulfill my needs. It's all about me, 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 me. And of course, I didn't realize that as a codependent, I just do anything for anybody. I was so giving, but actually, I was sucking, just trying to suck everything I could from them to get what I needed. So again, once that one turned into, reality and, it wasn't rainbows and butterflies like it always is in the beginning, I was like, I'm done. It was 5 years again, but we didn't get married. And then shortly after, because I still needed to be in another relationship, I hooked up with an old friend from the military, and we hooked up, and he was like all over that. He's like, "Where are you? I'm coming right now. I'll be on a plane tomorrow to see you." And he was. And asked me to come and live with him and move in with him and he would take care of me. My boys were teens. They were out of the house at this point. My daughter was 16, and we moved to Virginia. We moved in with him, and yeah, he had money, he had cars, he had everything, but he was an alcoholic.
Mm.
He was addicted to pornography. He was a sex addict. And I'm just like, it's like you were saying, it's like repeating this pattern of insanity, doing the same exact thing, but expecting each time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be different. But I'm always the same. It's kind of like I'm the common denominator in all of these broken relationships. So I'm the one that's broken. Of course, I didn't see it that way, obviously. So again, here I came into this relationship. I was in that relationship for 11 years. We finally got married around 10 years. And 6 months in, I knew it was a mistake. But as a codependent, one of the things that codependents do is they stay in unhealthy relationships way longer than they should, just hoping they'll change, hoping things will get better, hoping whatever, right? And so, yeah, my daughter finally left. She was gone, found herself a man. But at that time, when I was in Charlotte, um, before I married my fourth husband, I was going to church all the time. I actually worked in the church and still living in sin. I was, doing both things. And so when I got with this guy in Virginia, I was telling him, I'm a Christian, I wanted to, well, I don't want a Bible thumping wife. And I was like, oh gosh. So I didn't want to lose that, what he was giving me, those feelings that I needed. So I turned my back on the Lord and turned my attention to him. That's what codependents and love and relationship addicts do. That's what we do. Yep.
So 11
But
years, so 10 years, you get
10,
married. And isn't it interesting? As soon as you get married, you said 6 months in, and
6 months of moving in with him, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? But so during this time, all during this time, my second son struggled with drugs and, and alcohol. I mean, just horribly. And it finally came to a point. Well, actually, he was a father at 16. And I mean, he was a kid himself. I mean, that didn't go well, but in and out of relationships himself, I think. And it was a mess. He was just an addict for so many years. We struggled with that. I think I was in denial that he was an addict and just, typical male. He's just, doing what he wants to do and let him do it and just kind of, but I was an enabler as well, I realized now. When he started really going downhill and he finally said he wanted to get into rehab, I got him into rehab. I paid for that. Then he got DUIs. I would bail him out. I was just like, oh my gosh, it just didn't get any better. Um, and then near the end of this fourth marriage, I'd started going back to church with my son, my addicted son. He moved in with us out of rehab, and that was probably a huge mistake. But he wanted to get back to church. And I said, good, let's go. So we found a church and we started going to church. And I stuck with it, but he didn't. And about a year in, that's when I was invited to celebrate recovery. And I was about at the end of my rope with my marriage. And I needed something. I desperately needed help. And so I started going to celebrate recovery. And oh my gosh, what an eye opener. I'm telling you. Um, Yeah, it changed my life, to be honest with you. I was just like, I just felt like I was at home. I finally was able to just talk and talk and talk and talk about all my stuff and listen to other people talk and finally realized that I was a codependent. I didn't even know what that was. That I was love and relationship addiction. I didn't know what that was. That I had always blamed the other person. And I finally realized that I had a part to play in a lot of that. And I went through the 12 steps. And as soon as I was done, I was leading a 12 step. So, yeah, it changed my life.
So what did you learn that first, that first year there? What did you learn about yourself?
First and foremost, like I was accepted, I wasn't judged. It was the first time I was able to take off this mask of this. I always had to have this facade that I was this strong, confident woman who had it all together, right? Which I wasn't at all. I was just a broken little kid. And so I just started focusing on myself. And so during the first step study, I was learning. I was learning about my codependence and my love and relationship addiction, my unrealistic expectations, my blaming others, and all of the dysfunctional coping mechanisms that I had developed because of my insecurities mostly. And so it was just like the tip of the iceberg. So I immediately got into another step study and was just worked harder and harder and harder. And during that time, probably around the before I finished my first step study, I moved out of my husband's house. We got separated, and I moved out. And so then I was just working on me. I think I felt like I had always been on the fence with the Lord. I didn't know a lot about the Bible. I didn't know a lot about religion. Even though I've been in church, I just didn't really get the whole thing. So I think I finally came to a point where I had to make a decision. I'm either all in or I'm going to be all out. I have to believe everything the word says, or I have to believe none of what the word says. And I said, I have to try it. So I said, I'm all in, Lord. I'm all in. And it just changed my life, Eric. Ever since that first step study, I have been a leader in CR, and I just took my 13-year chip.
Wow. So
Not too
13
long ago.
years. That's
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So I would say though that I really believe that the Lord brought me to that place, brought me to CR, brought me back to Him, drew me back to Him. I always knew that I belonged to Him, and I always yearned to be reunited with Him. And so I really believe that He brought me back to give me the foundation that I needed to go through what I needed to go through because he knew what was going to come in my future. Um, I love what I do, and not only am I a leader in CR, I'm the ministry leader at my CR, I'm a state rep for CR, I'm the team lead all over Southern Arizona now, and I'm taking a group of women inside the prison. So now we're taking CR inside the prisons on Saturday mornings and just, you know, sharing Jesus with them, right? And hope and
Amen.
healing. He has truly restored the years the locust has eaten, right?
Yeah. So are there any scriptures that really mean something to you? Because I know there's several for me that are special to me. What about you? Is there anything that if someone said, hey, give me a couple encouraging scriptures, what would they be for you?
Um, Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, right? Prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope in the future. Um, Romans 8:1. There is now no condemnation for those because I lived with shame and guilt for so many years. And that was one of the biggest struggles coming into CR was trying to get rid of the shame and guilt and trying to forgive myself. Right. And so I was finally able to do that.
So if someone is listening and they are experiencing kind of what you described to me as the love and relationship addiction, that they're looking for other people to fill that void in their life. They're looking to other people to feed them what they need and they just aren't getting what they need, and maybe they're jumping from to relationship. So what advice do you give people that say, that sounds like what I've got?
Well, first and foremost, one of the things that really helped me was learning that everybody's broken. Everybody's got some insecurity issues and is looking for validation. Everybody wants to belong. And so the only one that can fill that is Jesus Christ. Broken people cannot fix broken people. So for me, the love and relationship addiction is like not nobody can fill that hole except Jesus Christ. And so God takes the mess of who we are. We don't change it. We can't change it. I tried. I couldn't change anything. But he transforms us from the inside out. I have been single and celibate for 13 years, praise God. And yeah, and I'm very happy. And he has given me so much, Eric, that I just want to try to give back to him, even just a tiny portion of what he's given me. And so I just serve him in any way that I can.
Diane, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you've been trying to fill the emptiness in your life with love and relationships, there's only one relationship that will actually fill the void in your life. That relationship is Jesus Christ, and he can fill your emptiness and change your life, just like he did for Diane. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.